Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is another thoughts on video, and the topic this time is first-time film directors. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on these first-timers, I would like to give a special shout-out to Corey for requesting this topic. And if there's another topic, film, or TV show that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, for this topic, I put together a list of my own, and I also enlisted some of my friends online to come up with their own picks. Now, some of the picks that they came up with aren't ones that I would necessarily put on a list, but I decided to incorporate them into the video. Also, I want to incorporate you into the video. Please leave in the comments down below what your picks for best first-time film directors are. So I'm going to start out with my list. The first director on my list is Jan de Bont. Jan de Bont started out his career with one hell of a bang with Speed in 1994. I mean, you cannot start your career any better than that. I mean, that film is an iconic action thriller. It's incredible. It's not just one of the best action thrillers in the 90s. It's honestly one of the best action thrillers of all time. So it's very hard to top what Jan de Bont started his career out with when it comes to his directorial debut. But there are some other impressive ones, or ones at least worth mentioning. One for me is Fred Dekker. He started out his career directing the horror comedy Night of the Creeps. I think that's one of the best blends of the two genres of the 1980s. Then on my list, I also have Tony Scott. Tony Scott started out his career with a very stylish and slick film called The Hunger. It's not my personal favorite of his, and when it comes to his career or his filmography, but it's still a really solid start to what was honestly a very underrated filmography. Tim Burton, his directorial debut was Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It was not only a box office smash, but it was also a critical hit and featured a lot of ambitious and really inspired directing. Quentin Tarantino, he started out his directorial career with Reservoir Dogs. I mean, it's a remarkable film. Like, for an independent movie made with a relatively low budget, it's quite impressive. James Wan, he started out his career with Saw, a horror film that created a whole new subgenre of horror and still stands to this day as arguably the best film in that genre. Tom Holland, he started out his directorial career with Fright Night, which is a fantastic film. One of my favorite films of the 80s, honestly, one of my favorite films of all time. My pick for the best vampire movie, Sam Raimi. He started out his career with The Evil Dead. The Evil Dead is an excellent film. It's one of the best horror films of the 80s, and honestly, one of the best horror films, period. He made it with an incredibly small budget, and it was definitely a labor of love. And for a first time director, there were quite a lot of shots and techniques and other elements of the film that were astonishing in terms of how Sam was able to pull them off. So, yeah, Sam Raimi definitely belongs on this list. Another director that has earned their spot is Kevin Smith. I have dunked on Kevin Smith over the years. I have ranted on him, but the man deserves his accolades here. His directorial debut in Clerks was great. It was amazing. For a independent film, for a first-time filmmaker, it was really something special. He created a film that became an instant icon for a lot of people. It's a movie that really did, in so many different ways, personify the 90s, and it still stands to this day as one of the best independent films ever made. Rob Reiner, he started out his career with This Is Spinal Tap. I mean, This Is Spinal Tap is one of the best mockumentaries, one of the best heavy metal films, and one of my personal favorites. And Rob Reiner really did start off with quite a rocking debut with This Is Spinal Tap. The Coen brothers, their directorial debut was Blood Simple. It was honestly a quite special and genuinely spectacular debut. A really tense and taut thriller. Mick Garris, he started out his career with Critters 2, I believe. I think Critters 2 was his directorial debut. One of the better sequels out there, and definitely one of the better directorial debuts from that particular genre. It's a film that I think featured a lot of really complicated practical effects, and for a first-time filmmaker, that can be kind of difficult. But Mick handled it really well. Adam Marcus, his directorial debut was Jason Goes to Hell. Now, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, a lot of people don't like the movie. I'm not one of them. I love that film, and I think Adam Marcus did a magnificent job with it, considering all the different constraints, all the different things he was dealing with Sean S. Cunningham on the set, New Line in the studio, and him being a first-time filmmaker. I mean, the gore scenes, the action sequences, the various different scenes throughout the movie that feature a lot of practical and visual effects, or just really complex setups. He handled it all remarkably well, and I think he deserves a lot more credit for that, and that's why I do have him on this list. Um, David Schmoller, he started out his directorial career with the terrific horror film in Tourist Trap. And I also have Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. This duo, they started out their careers with the Blair Witch Project, which still stands to this day as not only one of the most financially successful horror films, or just films of all time, it also stands as one of the best found footage films, and the film that really popularized the found footage genre. Now, there are some other first time directors that I want to mention. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember who. I think it was. I think Clive. Yeah, Clive Barker. I think Hellraiser was his directorial debut, if I remember correctly. I'm just looking it up real quick. I wanted to make sure. Um, yeah, Clive Barker. I mean, he started out with Hellraiser, one of the most visually interesting and dark and gothic horror films of the 80s. And I also have some other mentions here. Jack Shoulder, who started out with Alone in the Dark, a really solid slasher from the 80s. Steve Miner with Friday the 13th Part 2, which I think is one of the better slasher sequels, and also one of the better Friday the 13th films. Stan Winston, who started out with Pumpkinhead, which I think is a really solid debut. And speaking of effects artists and first time film debuts, I want to mention Chris Walas. I think Chris Walas did a wonderful job with his debut with The Fly 2. I even had the opportunity to meet Chris in person at a screening of The Fly, the 1986 film, and I got to get his autograph, shake his hand, and also thank him personally for his work in The Fly 2, and he really appreciated it. And I think he deserves way more accolades for what he did in that film, especially for a first time director. Um, Corey mentioned Jim Isaac, who started out his career with the horror show, which I thought was a pretty decent debut, but it's not one that I would personally put on my list. A friend of mine named Chris, he mentioned Michael Mann. That's definitely a killer entry. I mean, his first film that he did was Thief, and that film is tremendous. So Michael Mann is definitely somebody that should be mentioned here. Um, Another friend of mine, he mentioned Richard Kelly for Donnie Darko. I still haven't seen that film yet, so I can't really say a lot about it when it comes to its placement on the list. Corey also mentioned Yami Colette Sarah, who did House of Wax. That's definitely a good pick. The House of Wax remake, I think that film has some incredible visuals in it, so definitely something that I would uh, put on a list like this. I'm looking up another director here. I want to see if this director did something else before this movie. No, I think this is. Yeah, it's his directorial debut. Michael Lehman for Heathers. Heathers, I think, is a cult classic of the highest order. Love that movie. Features some really uh, strong direction, and it's a very difficult film when it comes to the subject matter and other elements of it. And Michael handled it like a pro. So I wanted to mention Michael Lehman. Um, I think there's probably some other first time directors that some people might uh, come up with or might mention uh, in the comments. I think I wonder what Joe Johnston, what I think his directorial debut was I think it was Honey I Shrunk the Kids. If that is the case, then I would definitely put him on the list as well. Yep. His directorial debut was Honey I Shrunk the Kids. That was not only a film that featured some Oscar worthy practical effects, but it was also a movie that featured some really solid direction in so many different areas for a film that was very effects heavy. So I definitely want to give Joe Johnston credit for that. Um, Another Joe I want to see, I think Joe Dante, I think he started out with, wasn't it Piranha? I think that was the first film he did. Um, no, his first film was Hollywood Boulevard that he co-directed. But technically, his first film that he directed as just a solo director was Piranha. So that's definitely one that I think is worth mentioning. One of the better Jaws ripoffs of its time, and honestly, period. As much as I am frustrated with this particular director, when it comes to how he's handling his own films on physical media, I definitely think that he's worth mentioning here because his first film as a full-time filmmaker was The Terminator. So yeah, I got to mention James Cameron here. I mean, that is one terrific, tremendous, just unbelievable debut for a first-time filmmaker. I cannot make a list like this and not mention James Cameron, despite my misgivings or my feelings towards him right now. Um, and when it comes to some other directors, George Lucas actually started out really strong with American Graffiti. I think he definitely deserves a little more credit for that. Um, it's a solid film. It looks great. It's got some good directing in it, and it's considered to be one of the better coming of age films of the era that it was released in, and that's for a good reason. Now, there's a few other people I'm looking up here because I'm just thinking about stuff off the top of my head. Okay, so what? It's not her. I don't think that. Trying to diversify this list, so to speak. Try to find some first-time female directors here. You know, I think Catherine Bigelow. She did co-direct The Loveless, but her first-time film debut as the sole director was Near Dark, and that was a dynamic and really strong start to her career. So I want to mention Catherine Bigelow. On the topic of female directors, I'm also going to look up um, another one real quick. I think she started out with, yeah, yeah. Rachel Talalay. She started out with Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and I thought she did a fantastic job with that film. Considering the kind of movie that it is, I thought she did a really good job with it. So Rachel Talalay. And there might be some other people that Corey might have mentioned. Corey, if you're watching, feel free to mention those directors if I forgot to put them on here. There's some that I considered, but their first time debut wasn't, in my opinion, strong enough to put on this list or put in this video. Like John McTiernan, yeah, Die Hard and Predator and Hunt for Red October. He has one of the most impressive early strings of successful films for a director, but his first film isn't really anything that special in Nomads. I know other people think Paul Verhoeven's debut is pretty strong. I wasn't really necessarily as big on it as other people. I know Wes Craven is a name that some people might mention. I don't really think Last House on the Left is on the same level as some of these other films that I mentioned, but I could throw it in as an honorable mention considering its impact on the genre of horror and the fact that it laid a lot of groundwork that was utilized in the future for other movies like it. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty. Alex Proyas is another one. Alex Proyas, he technically did do like an independent film in his home country, or it was a continent or whatever. But his first major studio film was The Crow, and I think he deserves some accolades and some nods for that. George Romero, I'm a huge fan of his, but I never really felt his first film was really anything that special. Same thing goes for John Landis. Even though I'm a huge fan of American Werewolf in London, Schlock, or whatever he did before, the Blues Brothers and Animal House, not so much. Trying to think, Ivan Reitman is another director that first film was just kind of so I can't really include him on the list. I got one that I think some people would probably scoff at, but I'm going to mention it anyway, and that is Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel with the Super Mario Brothers film in 1990. I think it was 93 or 94. That film gets, in my opinion, too much of a bad rap. It's nowhere near as bad as people make it out to be. And I thought the direction in that was really quite good. At least what they were able to put on the screen. I know at some point they got fired. They got replaced by another director, in Ronald Jaffe. But I don't know what his first film is that he directed. Trying to remember who directed this particular film. looking up in a couple different other directors, other potential people here. Oh, Randall Kreiser. Randall Kleiser, his directorial debut was Grease, one of the most iconic and memorable musicals of all time. So that's definitely a first time director worth mentioning. Looking up this film, I want to see if Nick Castle did anything before The Last Starfighter. Yeah, he did a film called Tag: The Assassination Game, so it's not really The Last Starfighter isn't his directorial debut. If it was, I would have put him on here. David Lynch, I'm not super big on Eraserhead compared to other people, but you know that's a very unique directorial debut. So it's definitely something that I feel should be on a list of this caliber. Um, John Carpenter. I mean, his first film was technically what, Dark Star, which I didn't care for. If we're talking about like his first film that's not a studio film and it's just like a major, just a regular movie, then well, absolutely freaking he would be on the list. I mean, John Carpenter. I mean, if I'm including other films, other directors, and I mentioned people like Alex Proyas, I might as well mention John Carpenter and also Tobe Hooper. Yeah, because John Carpenter's directorial debut was Assault on Precinct 13. If we're talking about a film that wasn't a glorified student film, and that's a really strong debut. And when it comes to Tobe Hooper, I mean, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He did other short films. Yes, he did other movies technically before he did uh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But if we're just being honest here, like the his debut for a lot of people is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not Eggshells. That's a glorified student film. That's what that is. So I think that's a good way to end this video is mentioning the late great Tobe Hooper, who had just one of the most titanic film debuts imaginable. A film that completely changed the face of horror for decades to come. Now, yeah, that's just my list. Like I said, there might be some other directors, there might be some other people that you feel should be mentioned. Feel free to mention them in the comments. Thanks for watching this video, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.